In today's episode of Rob Konrad Conversations, Aaron Stark.
I grew up and my family was a really drug addicted and violent house, and there was a lot of heavy drug use, extreme violence. He raped my mom in front of me. He would beat me and my brother. He kidnapped me and said that I was dead and my brother was going to be dead. We moved around. I went to like 40 different schools. We moved every couple of months, it seemed. With that chaotic lifestyle, I didn't really have much self-esteem and much self-worth. I was overweight. I smelled really bad. I never had clean clothes. My clothes were always dirty and ripped.
Growing up in a home of abuse and being the bullied kid at school.
I was really despondent and really depressed, and I started cutting myself with razor blades. And my arms were just covered in small pockmark cuts. I just felt like I was worthless and I wanted to die. Everybody around me had been telling me I was worthless for a very long time. That was a worthless piece of shit was kind of the constant.
Aaron reached his breaking point and was about to take revenge.
You start hating yourself, and then you move downwards, and you think you're going to lash out and hurt other people, and then you move even further down. You have nothing to lose because you have nothing. So you don't value anything. You don't even value your own life. You don't care if you live or die. You don't care if you go to jail. None of that. A jail would be an improvement to the life I was in. I said, hey, can I get a gun? Preferably one that shoots a lot of bullets.
But was prevented from the unspeakable by a simple act of kindness.
But I think he knew something. He knew that I was going to do something. Either I was going to hurt myself or I was going to hurt a lot of people, one or the other. But his simple acts of kindness, it opened my eyes and changed my world completely. I didn't end up getting the gun. It changed my opinion.
A touching story about bullying, the mindset of someone who has nothing to lose, and what we can do to prevent further tragedies from happening. Join the conversation now.
Welcome to Rob Konrad Conversations. Conversations with extraordinary people that motivate and inspire, learn, grow, and impact lives. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon for a new conversation every week.
Here comes the sunshine and burns away clouds like they never were.
Hey, this is Rob Konrad from Switzerland, and usually coming up with an introduction to the extraordinary people that I'm talking to is quite easy, because all you really need to do is to talk about their specific abilities or their achievements or their contributions to society or whatever it is that makes them extraordinary. But today's guest made me realize that it's not always that easy, because sometimes in life, what really defines us are not so much the things that we do, but sometimes what defines us in life are the things that we decide not to do. And that's especially the case with today's guest, Aaron Stark, because when he was a teenager, after years of heavy physical and mental abuse at home, after years of being bullied in one of the many schools he had to go to, he just couldn't take it anymore. He had enough. He lost all hope. And he made a decision. He made a decision to get a gun and to use that gun to cause as much harm as possible to as many people as possible. But luckily, before he could follow through with his plan, he was saved by a random act of kindness by somebody that he knew. And he managed to turn his life around. He's now a happily married husband, a proud father of 4. And he kept the story for himself until early this year. There was another massacre at one of the schools, and he decided to go public with his story. He decided to share his very important message about how all of us can do something to help people, to help young people who have lost their hope and who can't see the light of the tunnel, how we can help those people. He's a TED speaker. His TED Talk has been watched by millions of people across the globe. There's a book about his works in the writing, and I'm really thankful and I'm really happy to have you here with me today. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
How are you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. It's been kind of gloomy and rainy here today, but it's been a good day. It's my day off. So.
Oh, fantastic. Man, so it takes a lot of balls to come out with a story like you did. So
thank you.
What made you do that?
Well, my wife and my daughter were after Parkland, which was a really terrible school shooting here in the States. It was down in Florida, and it hit really close to home. I have 2 high school age kids, and earlier in the year, my daughter had lost a friend to suicide. She shot herself in the head.
Yeah.
And so it's a really close to home subject. And then after Parkland, my eldest daughter and my wife were talking and crying with each other and like having this big heartfelt conversation about how could someone ever get to that point where they could do that? How could someone ever get to the spot where they felt like killing somebody was the reasonable way out? And sadly, I understand, because of, like you said, back in the day, I was in that spot. And it's such a rare thing to feel that I don't think people really understand what it's like when you get that depressed, and what it's like to be that close to wanting to annihilate everything around you. And so I just made a quick Facebook post, and that was not really meant to go public. It was just for my family. But at the same time, I also was in this political discussion group, and it was one of the kind of groups where there's a lot of really partisan bickering, a lot of insults thrown around like libtard and conservacuck and things like that, just stupid juvenile kind of insults. But occasionally have some good political discussions. And so since it was the topic of the day, I posted it to that group too. And that got out and evidently connected with some people. And my local news did a story on me, and that evidently connected with a lot of people. It got 17 million views last time I checked, something like that. And so then it's just been this roller coaster of responses. But the thing that keeps me going with it, and you said that takes a lot of balls. And for me, honestly, I think it really did. For me, that's just my normal. It was just what I was growing up with and living, and it was just kind of the reality that I was existing in. So I didn't really see it as being that out of the normal, honestly, until I got all the response, I feel like I'm looked at now as a little bit of a unicorn, because people who get to that spot who are really in that darkness either die or end up in prison. And I didn't really realize that till I started talking about it. But within the first week of me coming and writing that Facebook post, I got contacted by a couple of major survivors groups who have been through a couple of these massive tragedies. The Parkland students, an uncle who had a niece in the room whose friend got shot and killed in Parkland. He told me that his niece watched my video, and it let her get a little, or watch the story about me, and it let her get a little bit of peace and made her feel better, and please keep talking about it. And to me, that combined with a similar response from the Vegas survivors group from that terrible mass shooting in Vegas with something like 60-something people killed from the guy shooting out of the Mandalay Bay. And then from the Sandy Hook parents, which to me is the absolute worst of all the school shootings. That's the one where it was a elementary school or a kindergarten elementary school, and it was something like 22 small children got killed. And the parents survivors group from that contacted me, and they all told me to keep going. And to me, anything else that might come is just gravy on top of that. You know, it's just icing on the cake. That made it completely worth it. And all the pain that I went through and all the trolling that I might come across, it's all just, it doesn't affect me whatsoever, because if I can use my darkness to help fuel helping someone else, then that's what I want to do.
So for those who are not familiar with the story, can you talk a little bit about what was it like at that time, and how did you feel at that time, and what made you, I don't know, what led up to that decision, basically?
Absolutely. I'll start from the beginning. So I grew up, and my family was a really drug addicted and violent house, and there was a lot of heavy drug use, extreme violence. I always called it movie of the week level violence. Things like my real dad. We had the very first permanent restraining order that was issued in Colorado was on my father.
Oh shit. Okay.
And it was the kind of stuff where he raped my mom in front of me. He would beat me and my brother. He kidnapped me and said that I was dead and my brother was going to be dead if my mom didn't meet him somewhere. And then when she got there, he tried to beat her there too. Luckily there was police there, so that got stopped. But a lot of those kind of really outlandish kind of violent stories that just seemed to be the everyday kind of thing for me. Like I would come home and see people on crack beating each other up, and I just go to my bedroom and play video games. But in the process, we moved around a lot. We moved around. I went to like 40 different schools. We moved every couple of months, it seemed. And it was never really on a plan. There was a lot of getting woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get in a car and drive all the way across the country because the cops are knocking on the door and we need to get out. So we'd leave everything we had, pack what little tiny bit of stuff we could get that really quick, and then run across the country. Then a couple months later, start it all again. So I was always the new kid. And I went with all the different schools I went to. It was compounded by the fact that with that chaotic lifestyle, I didn't really have much self-esteem and much self-worth. So I didn't take care of myself physically. I was overweight. I smelled really bad. I never had clean clothes. My clothes were always dirty and ripped, and I was a nerd. So that never was very popular. I was back in the day before superheroes were cool. So I was a big comic book geek. And not only were they not cool back in the 80s, but it was actively damaging to your coolness to be into comic books. So that was never a help. And I would get picked on a lot. So I developed there was just new bullies everywhere. So I started to develop a self-depreciation kind of thing where I'd insult myself more than anybody else could insult me. So if you're coming at me with a fat joke, I have 5 fat jokes that are better than yours. So you're not going to be able to hurt me. But in the process, I completely destroyed any self-esteem that I may have, just kind of grounded into dust. Mm-hmm. And as I got older, that was early on. That was 9 to probably early 4 or 5 years old till 9 or 10 is about what that is. And then for my teenage years, that kind of self-loathing kind of metabolized, and I discovered the whole darker aspect of culture. So I got into darker music like 9 Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson, Ministry, that kind of stuff. And I not only embraced it, I kind of just ran headlong into it and wore it like a coat. Like I wasn't the goth kid. I was the guy that told all the goth kids what to do. And so it was, and I always had gatherings of people around me, but I never had any friends. It was more just, I considered them disaster groupies. They just kind of wanted to see the moving car crash of my terrible life that I was going through. Because the whole time I was doing that, I would go home, and my parents were massively into crack cocaine. So there was lots of crack and lots of drinking, lots of violence. So I would have to go home. If I went home, I'd be fighting. And so I ran away around 14 years old and didn't really come back on a steady level till I was 17. And during that time, I was living on the streets. I was doing a lot of LSD. I didn't smoke marijuana till I was 19, but I did a lot of LSD when I was a teenager. Mm. And that it was an escape from, I was big into escapism looking back on it, in comic books and video games and tripping acid. That was all just to kind of escape the reality that I was in that was just killing me, basically. And so I was really despondent and really depressed. My parents had shown me the way to react to people, and you kind of learn how to react to everybody by what you're taught growing up. So if you're shown that politeness and kindness will help you, that you'll do that. But I wasn't. I was shown that lying and stealing and violence was the way to get what you wanted. So kind of adopted that in my teenage years. So I was lying to all my friends. I stole their things. I ended up being very isolated and very alone. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was screaming into the void. It got really bad when I started cutting. Cutting is when you're depressed, you can get into self-harm. And I did. I started cutting myself with razor blades, and my arms were just covered in small pockmark cuts and just all over the place. And it started getting really serious. I just felt like I was worthless and I wanted to die. Everybody around me had been telling me I was worthless for a very long time. It was just, that was a worthless piece of shit was kind of the constant insult that I would have. And so it was, I ended up in what the one few friend I had left who I was already trying to do my best to damage that friendship. I was living in his shed in the back of his house. Mm-hmm. And his parents wouldn't let me sleep in the house because I was a bad influence, obviously. And so he let me sleep in their tool shed and was sneaking every now and then. And so I'm sitting there in the shed. My arm is just covered in cuts and blood, so much that I'm dripping blood on the floor. I'm sitting in this dingy gray chair, and the roof above me has got open holes in it. Rain's pouring down. I just realized that there's not really any more bottom to go to than that. And so I wanted to die, but part of me didn't. So the next morning I realized how close I was to death. I got up, went into my friend's house, knocked on his door and asked to talk to the mom and asked if I could use the phone. And I called social services. I had to look it up in the phone book. I couldn't think of where to go. That was the only thing I could think of. So I grabbed the Yellow Pages and looked up the number for social services. And I called them and told them that I was having problems and I was feeling suicidal. And they had me come in for a meeting. Mm-hmm. And so I borrowed some bus fare from my friend's mom and got on the bus and went down there. And by the time I got there, they did just call. They also called my mom. And so she was one of the biggest sources of abuse growing up. I have scars on a lot of different parts of my body from where she's hit me and where she's broken plates over my head, things like that. And lots of mental scarring, lots of, I would consider it PTSD at this point. Mm-hmm. But they called her in. And since we had spent our entire lives running from authorities and lying to officers and lying to social workers, because anytime anybody got a whiff of what was going on in my house, we would just make up a story and move away. So she knew exactly what to say. And she got them to believe that I was making it all up and it was all just a hoax. Even though in the meeting I had produced a bloody razor blade from my pocket, thrown it on the table and said, that exactly is my problem right there. This is what's going on. They still didn't believe me. They sent me home with her. And then on the way home with her, she turned to me and she said the worst sentence that anyone's ever said to me. She said that next time I should have done a better job, and next time she'll buy me the razor blades. And incredible. I had always kind of worn that darkness as a jacket, like I said, but you want me to be the bad person, I'm going to be the bad person. So I just ran into it. I'm the piece of shit and I'm the evil one. Okay, well here's what's going to happen. And so I went from just being kind of embracing it to using it to hurt as many people around me as I possibly could. I was lashing out in every way I could do. And a couple months later, I was basically in that same spot, only without my friend's shed, because by this point I had pushed everybody away. Mm-hmm. And so I was actually sleeping in a gravel pavement outside of my then girlfriend's house. Mm-hmm. And I was sleeping in her driveway. And I was in this position where I would wake up in the morning, go to the grocery store next door, eat a bunch of free samples that they'd be putting out, a cup of coffee, go take a quick sponge bath in the bathroom with whatever wet towel I could find, and then go sit freezing on a bench outside the restaurant next door to it. And that was my day, because I didn't have anywhere else to be. And I was suicidal again. And I knew that last time I had told them ahead of time and they called in my mom. So I wasn't going to do that this time. I was going to show up somewhere and say, I need help because I have to do it on my own. And so across the street from my high school that I was at the time, which I wasn't attending, I was just enrolled in the school, but I never actually was in class. I was at school all the time, but never in school. And so across the street from it, there was a place that said mental health on the sign. I didn't really look too far into it beforehand, but I knew that the sign said mental health. So I went there to go see if I could get some help. And I told them that I was feeling suicidal and I was depressed and I felt like I was being ignored by everybody around me and they still didn't believe me. Something about how, since the previous therapist didn't feel fit to admit me, that this one didn't think she could either. And I don't know whether that was from being too young and inexperienced or if it was just, I don't know what it was, but she told me, I'm sorry, we can't help you, and just sent me out with nothing. Hmm. And that just made my mind snap. I had tried twice to get myself help. I really was worthless, and that was it. And so I hit the stage there's levels to depression. It's kind of like diving. Even when you talk about it, they talk about diving into the depths or going down the spiral or falling into the darkness. That's because there's kind of stages to it. Like you start with self-loathing and you start hating yourself, and then you move downwards, and you think you're going to lash out and hurt other people, and then you move even further down. And underneath, when you hurt other people, I call it annihilation. That spot, there is no good. There's nothing you care about. You have nothing to lose because you have nothing. So you don't value anything. You don't even value your own life. You don't care if you live or die. You don't care if you go to jail. None of that. A jail would be an improvement to the life I was in. And so when you're at that point, something really strange happens. The earlier stages are very emotional, and they're very tempestuous and chaotic, and lots of violent emotions and lots of conflicting opinions. Once you get to that annihilation stage, all that kind of vanishes, and it ends up being really quiet and still. And because when you don't have anything to care about, you just stop caring. And so there's nothing that can hurt you, because there's nothing. In order to be hurt, you have to have given a shit about what was just getting hurt. Mm-hmm. So when you don't care, there's nothing that can hurt you. And so I was in that spot. I had hit the point of annihilation. And I knew that in my school, there was some gangbangers. This was the early 90s, mid 90s. So gangs were still really prevalent. Lots of Crips and Bloods around North High. It was North High in Denver, Colorado was the school. And I knew that they had access to guns because they had been talking about it a lot. And a couple of them had brought guns to school before. Mm-hmm. And I knew them because I was always, like I said, I was kind of living at the school at the time, where I was sleeping in the park across the street, and I was just kind of always there. And they knew I wasn't in class. They knew I wasn't going to be a narc, obviously. They had sold drugs to my family. They knew that I wasn't on the side of the police at the point. So I wasn't a danger to them. And they were friendly with me. We got along on a social level. So, but I didn't really know anybody beyond nicknames and first names. And neither they didn't really know me that well either. But I went to the one I knew the best, and I said, "Hey, can I get a gun? Preferably one that shoots a lot of bullets." And he didn't really ask any questions. He's like, "Yeah, sure, man. I'll get 3 days. Takes me about 3 days to get one. Give me an ounce of weed, and I'll get that for you." I said, "All right, cool." So I planned on doing it, and the plan that I had always kind of joked about it, like, because when you're in that dark spot and you're in the earlier stages, it's kind of be funny and it's a relaxing thing in a way to kind of fantasize and joke with your friends, like, "Oh, I do this, I do that," that kind of stuff. And it's never really serious. There's a lot of that nowadays. It's trolling is basically the output of that. But during all that time, I had joked about and kind of made a plan that would have been viable about attacking either a school or a food court, because they both had a surprise element and a large amount of people that could be killed in a short amount of time, regardless of the security situation. Because my school had armed police stationed in it at all times. There was multiple armed police officers in North High at all times. So, but I just factored it into the plan. It's not stop me at all. That was just part of the plan. So I was going to walk into the food court and shoot as many people as possible, and then kill myself. And do the same thing at my school food court. I just walk in off the field and go over the fence and just walk in and start killing as many people as I could. And it wasn't about the people. It wasn't directed towards the people that particularly. It was because it wasn't that, "Oh, you bullied me, so you deserve it," or "You picked on me, so you deserve it." It wasn't like that at all. It was completely random. And it was an expression of my anger and pain. It was me screaming out that, "You guys don't want to hear me and you want to ignore me. You're going to hear me now. I'm going to fucking make you listen to me this time." And it was, so I went, my family being druggies, getting hold of the ounce wasn't really a problem. We had a guy that was sleeping on the floor that always had weed on him. So I just kind of stole it from him. And I went and gave it to the guy, and I was waiting for 3 days. That was within 3 days. But luckily I wasn't really alone in that darkness. That earlier friend who I've been living in his shed, his name's Mike, and he had been watching from afar pretty much what was going on with me. And we had been close friends for a lot of years before that. We made friends about 12 years old. And by this time I was like 17 years old. So about 5 years we've been friends at that point. And so he had seen firsthand what I'd been going through. And he saw what was happening with my mom. And he was standing outside when I would get beaten and kicked out of my house. And that I got beaten and kicked out on my 16th birthday, and went to his house, and his mom made a brownie for me and shoved a giant red taper candle, one of the big table candles, in the middle of it. That was my birthday cake for 16. So he had seen all of this, and he just he wouldn't let me leave his side. He's like, dude, come on with me. We're going to go and hang out at my house. I'm like, okay, cool. So we go over to his house. Like, God, just hour. Let me give you a meal, dude. Let's watch a movie. Let's just relax. It's okay. You can talk about it if you want to, but you don't have to. But just don't do whatever you're going to do. Just, it's okay. We got this. And
did he know about your plans? So did he have?
He didn't know about my plans, but I think he knew something. He knew that I was going to do something. It was coming to a head. Either I was going to hurt myself or I was going to hurt a lot of people. One or the other. Because he had heard me talk about it before. Just in that kind of fantasizing conversation, he had heard me talk about that kind of stuff. And so, but he didn't know any details about it. I hadn't spoken to him about what I was going through. But his simple acts of kindness, it opened my eyes and changed my world completely. It stopped. I didn't end up getting the gun. It changed my opinion. I ended up spending the weekend at his house. We ended up playing video games and watching movies and just having a normal day. And for once, I felt like I was a person. And like a person. And when you're treated like a person, when you don't even feel like you're a human, it'll change your entire world. Mm. And it did for me. And it was kindness that saved me, but it wasn't the kind of kindness that was like, hey, can I fix you? There's something wrong with you. What can I do for you? Is there a program I can get you in? Because that kind of stuff is really overbearing, and it can get really alienating, and it can push you off, push you away. Like, oh, I'm broken. I need to be fixed. Okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. It was literally just, all right, dude, it's okay. You're normal. It's a normal reaction to feel that way to this shit that you've been going through. It's okay.
Treating you as a normal human being for once.
Yeah, you're a normal human being. It's okay to be sad about being hurt. It's okay to run away from someone screaming at you while they're on drugs. It's a normal reaction to feel bad about that kind of stuff, and it doesn't make you a monster. And the realization that I wasn't worthless and that I wasn't the bad guy and that I wasn't a monster, me. It completely changed me. But it wasn't like some light switch that went off. It wasn't like some click, oh, now I'm better. I got out of that phase of homicide and out of that annihilation stage, and I felt emotion again and felt that I had something that I could potentially look forward to. But I was still depressed, and I was still suicidal. And after a couple of years, I believe it was my 19th or 20th birthday, I was again in that kind of suicidal state. My family has deep hooks in me. That my mom, as much pain as I went through, I could never leave my mom completely. Like it was one of those things where I would always go to her and respond when she needed something, or I would go check in occasionally and see how she was, even though everything was chaotic and hurting. And she's my mom. So I was always kind of around my mom. And so the violence in my family got worse and worse and worse and worse. And there was never any like upswing at all. There was never any good parts that came up. It was just seemed this big downward spiral. And so about my 19th or 20th birthday, I can't remember which one it was. I was in that suicidal spot again. And I hadn't told anybody about what was going to happen. I wasn't homicidal. I had gotten a large amount of drugs, and I didn't take drugs besides LSD at this point, but I had gotten a large amount of drugs, and I was going to take all of them in the night and kill myself. But I didn't tell anybody that. And my birthday was going to be the last day. And so I was hanging out at Mike's house in the afternoon that day, and he's like, okay, we're going to go to Amber's house tonight. And Amber was another friend of ours. And she had hung out. She was one of Mike's friends. She was like, he had a social circle. So she was one of his friends. And we would go over to her house occasionally and hang out for like a couple hours, kind of shoot the shit. And then we'd go hang out, do our other stuff. So it wasn't really out of the normal to go to Amber's house. And so I thought it was just going to be another go over, watch a movie, like have a drink and then go home. And then I got there, and instead of it being that, it was a surprise party for me. And it was a whole bunch of people. Most of them I hadn't even met before, and they had made me a blueberry peach pie for my birthday. And so instead of going home and killing myself, I partied with a bunch of friends and ate a blueberry peach pie and had a wonderful time having this loving experience with my friends. And that was the last time that I tried to kill myself. And that was, after that, I just, hold on. Of course, right now Windows wants to update. Let me move my window. After that, it was just a recovery. Good 10, 15 years of recovery, where I went through and focused on getting myself out of those situations, getting myself out of that spot where I felt like I was worthless, and realizing my own self-worth. And then I went through a process of confronting the people that I thought had hurt me the most, but not in, and I think this is a very important step, not in an aggressive way and not in an accusatory way. I didn't go to anybody and say, you hurt me and you deserve to pay, or this is what happened and you need to get it. It wasn't like that at all. It was just, I know this is what happened. This is the reality of what I went through, and I'm not going to forget it. And so my opinion of you is now completely changed. So whatever relationship we had before is done. Okay. And it was just acknowledgement. And I felt that was a very cathartic thing, and it helped me move past a lot of those issues. And then what finally made me completely jump over that ledge of being on the good side again is I had my first daughter. And my older two right now kids, my eldest by myself, she's 11 years old. Her name's Natasha. And having her finally literally gave me something to live for, and something that I would die for. So that completely changed me. Then from then on, it's been trying to get on the positive side, trying to make my life a better thing. Yeah. And yeah.
Wow. So that's a lot to digest, really. I'm glad you made it. I have to say that. So I'm glad.
Thank you. Me too.
It's an incredibly inspiring story. So it's I don't even know where to start.
Well, I'm like I say, I'm like a walking Ask Me Anything. So literally, you can ask me any question you want.
Yeah, well, I will. Don't worry.
Nothing too personal.
I mean, help me a little bit to understand that point where you really wanted to go after other people. So I can understand that your situation leads to a point where you don't have hope and where you feel suicidal. Mm-hmm. That part I can understand, but in a way,
how does it switch from hurting yourself to hurting others?
Exactly. Why not just kill yourself, others alone? Not hurt anymore. And why involve others? If not the people that bullied you in the first place.
Well, I think that first off, it was an extremely selfish urge. Okay, so let's get that out of the way front. Let me just say flat out, it was not at all a positive thing. There's nothing good about it. It was the most terrible and destructive and atrocious thing that I had ever thought about attempting. And so there's nothing that I would ever say, nothing that I would ever do now to encourage, applaud, approve of, or any of that for those kind of urges. That there is a way out of it, and that is not the way. Okay, so I was wrong in my thinking at the time. Just so we can preface this. Explain what the feeling I was in. But you got to understand it was a bad place to be, and these are negative feelings to have. So when you're in that spot, for myself personally, I felt invisible. I felt like nobody cared about me. I felt like, and I had told my friends this for a long time, or people around me for a long time, that I felt like nobody was ever going to remember me. Like nobody was ever going to remember. Nobody, like when I walked out of the room, everybody forgot that I existed. And I seemed like no matter what was going on, no matter how much pain I was in, nobody cared, and nobody was paying any attention. And so it was my scream out that you're going to listen to me. It was me demanding attention, and me basically throwing a big fit is what it amounts to. It's the equivalent of throwing a fit as a toddler. That you're not, that I want this and give it to me. It's that, only on a much deadlier level.
Give me that attention.
What was that?
Give me that attention that I deserve.
Exactly. Exactly. Give me the attention that I crave. And it's one of the weird things about attention and wanting it is it doesn't necessarily need, when you crave attention, the attention doesn't have to be positive. That's negative attention can be positive. There's a comfort and calmness in that kind of darkness. When you're in that kind of depression and it becomes your normal, it actually is a comfortable and peaceful place. Like it becomes your regular and it's relaxing in a way to be around that kind of violence. Huh?
At least somebody notices you. Or
Exactly. At least you feel something. Because one of the things about my life growing up was that I felt for the longest time like I was just watching my life as a movie pass me by, and I had no control over any of it. And I that's what I felt repeatedly. I would say that all the time. I felt like I'm watching my life as a movie. I'm just standing by and watching everything pass me by. And even my own emotions, I didn't have any real agency over. Like I was in a lot of pain and anger and anguish and having to deal with. I learned early on that I was like people. You talk about the fight or flight syndrome. People fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. And I learned right away that I'm a fighter. I do not freeze and I do not run away. And I learned that because I've been in those situations where shit's going down right now, and you have to go from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds, and then it's going to stop right afterwards. Mm-hmm. But you have to decide right now if you're going to do this, and it is a life or death situation. If you don't move, you're going to die. Mm-hmm. And I've been in those situations because I would do things like I came home one day and I would walk in I was working at a 7-Eleven and I was like 16, 17 years old. And I walked into my house and nobody saw me come home. I walked into my room and sat down, turned on the TV, got on the phone with a friend of mine and heard a boom, boom, boom. I step out and literally right next to my doorway is my stepdad with my mom with his hand around her throat with her foot up off the ground, leaning into the wall, choking her. Mm-hmm. And so I immediately go from talking with my friend to dropping the phone. I grab him by the throat. I was a really big teenager. Okay. So I was big and strong and I was the mosh pit. So when I went to concerts, I'd push over like 50 people at a time because I was that kind of guy. So I was scary big at the time. And so I grabbed him by the throat, slammed him into the microwave, slam him through the fridge door, knock that off the fridge, and then literally push him into the back wall of the garage and start pushing him through the wall because it was kind of a thin wall. So I start pushing, the wall starts bulging out. And so, then I just drop him, walk right back into my room and grab the phone, get back on the phone. So in a split second, I go from 0 to 100 and then stop right away. And that kind of, to get that, it's, from what I've talked to and people I've talked to, it's very similar to being on a battlefield. You get that kind of sense of that the lulls of normalcy and then punctuated by extreme moments of insanity. Yeah. And it can be very traumatic. But when you're doing all that, the flip from suicidal to homicidal can be kind of easy. It's you don't care about yourself and you don't care about anything that you're doing. You don't care about any of your life. You don't care if you live or die. You don't care if they shoot you. You don't care if it hurts. And at the same time, you want to be heard and you feel invisible and you want to scream. Mm-hmm. And that combination means that you're going to scream anywhere you can, and it doesn't matter what the response is.
Mm-hmm. What I'm starting to understand is the mindset. Why not just kill the people who bullied you and the people who were responsible for your suffering? So why go random?
Because it was, to me, that wouldn't have been fitting. It would actually, for me personally, I would have left my mom and my stepdad alive to watch the destruction of what I did and have to live with that. Mm-hmm. To me, that was more painful. To have to live with the fact that they produced a monster.
Okay.
And so that was the punishment to them. That's why they honestly were never a target of anything that I was going to do.
And the people at your school who bullied you?
Yeah, but that, honestly, it was so omnipresent and so prevalent that turned into a faceless mob. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have like 3 particular bullies that picked on me a lot. It was more that I had 70 or 80 bullies at every school. Mm-hmm. And so it was just a hatred of humanity by that point. It was, I thought that everybody that looked at me thought that I was a worthless piece of shit. So I was just going to be the worthless piece of shit that everybody thought I was.
Yeah. Okay. So You mentioned that you had a lot of positive reactions on social media and from news channels and so on. People are cruel despite whatever people do. And did you have any reactions saying, he's just someone trying to get attention and he's just never anything, so maybe he's just making up a story and going to news, being a TED speaker now, so it's just
on the making up the story part, that one got easily and quickly debunked because, of course, I got that right away. But I do have one big advantage of this: with the people that I talk about are still active in my life at this time. So I have both. Mike and Amber are still close friends of mine. Mike is still my best friend. Amber, I still talk with her all the time. The people who were in school with me at North are still my friends today. So on Facebook, we found each other. So I have both classmates who watched me go through it, people who were the bullies of mine, who I talk about explicitly in the talk. Like, I'm easily verifiable with the story. The only out of all of the story that's come up, out of all the responded, it's amazing the amount of trolls that I've received. Just guess, take a guess, how many you would think would be a trolling someone like me on the internet? How many do you think that would be?
I mean, looking at the average YouTube videos, if you had like a couple of million views, I would expect a few thousand probably.
Well, I have to distinguish this because, in my opinion, there's two types of trolls. The insulting trolls on a personal attack level. Okay. On the YouTube video, I've had 0.
Okay.
I've had juvenile trolls, which are the obvious kind of they say something about my weight, or they say like, I'm a school shooter too, or they say something like it's obviously a juvenile kind of like ha 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 kind of thing. And that, to me, I don't even count that as trolling. That's really low grade.
It's idiots.
Being idiots, like posting lyrics to a song. There's the song "Pumped Up Kicks" that evidently talks about school shooting. There's like a couple hundred post the lyrics to that song. Like, that's some kind of troll. Or they just use the title, like, "I was almost a school shooter." Wow. Like, and like that, to me, that's not a troll. So I don't even count those guys. But what's funny about that section is, I'd say about 40% of them by this point on the YouTube video actually apologize or do that kind of jokey trolling in the first part and then say, "Oh, by the way, I watched the video and it was really powerful and really impressive and thanks a lot for sharing it." Okay. And so it's that I get that both sides. But on personal level, like personal messages sent to me, because I got the biggest response that I've received personally has been through my direct messages over Facebook or Twitter or email by this point. And that's over 20,000 messages. Okay.
Wow.
And from literally all over the globe, from every continent except Africa, and from New Zealand, Australia, Sweden, Pakistan, Brazil, Germany, England, France, all of them, every state, all through Canada. And out of those ones, 20,000 personal messages to me, I got less than 10 trolls.
Wow. Okay.
Of any kind, of either side.
I would have expected way more.
No, less than 10. And 5 of those are blood related to me. Okay.
Good old family, yeah.
So, because my mom, my grandma, my brother, they disown me. They don't want anything to do with me. And the reason is because they don't want me talking about what happened in the past. I'm making the family look bad. So, in my opinion, if you're upset about me talking about the truth of what happened when I was growing up and you're not paying attention to what I am now, then it's not my problem. And you're the one that's doing the wrong here. So, that's not going to stop me one bit. But the outpouring of positive response has just been amazing. It's crossed every boundary, every age level, like from the young, depressed kid to the CEO of major corporations who have spent hours on the phone with me crying, because I also made a point with all the 20,000. I've personally responded to about 98% of those. Mm-hmm. So and not just some form response, like personal responses to everybody that I can talk to. And it's Republicans, Democrats, Trump supporters, Trump haters, gun opponents, gun advocates, all walks of life. They find a common ground in that sense of pain and loneliness and feeling like you're worthless. I think that's near universal. I think that almost everybody feels that. They just feel it at different levels. So the kid who's getting picked on at school and then comes home and has to work really hard to make their parents proud has the same pain that I had. Mine an extreme, but mine also is not as extreme as it gets. One of the weirdest parts about my story that people don't see is that I am totally not abnormal. There are thousands of people who have went through similar or if not worse things than me just in my state, and millions across the globe. This is that sense of the pain and depression is the root of a ton of our problems, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I personally think it's rooted in this sense of xenophobia that we have, that the person is different from us is evil. And so that causes the stigma that since I'm depressed, that's what makes people think that I'm going to get trolled. If I'm depressed and I had those bad feelings, then something must be wrong with me and I must be the bad person. So if I'm expressing that and if I'm crying, then I'm weak and I'm somehow damaged because of that. Or like there's all this stigma put on something that's different than us, that's the other, that we start to hate. And that has over so much in our society that it seems that, like, in a weird way, my story and the response to it is directly connected to Trumpism, and it's directly connected to the Me Too movement. And all of these have the same underlying fundamental realities, that we have to look at the people who are in pain and who are angry, not as monsters and demons, but as people with issues that we need to listen to. Mm-hmm. And so that's why when I talk about this stuff, I never mention and I never push the ideals of gun control or mental health.
Yeah.
Saying either one of those things to me completely diverts the conversation, and the other side has so many presuppositional arguments and preloaded responses that as soon as you mention gun control, the anti-gun control people have everything they want to say against it. That diverts the argument, and you get lost in the shuffle. So instead of saying either of those, instead of saying mental health, I say I felt I was worthless and I was abused because I was told I was worthless all the time. Mm-hmm. And instead of saying gun control, I say, if you're licensed and you are an adult, own whatever gun you want. Be licensed and regulated. I just want to keep the guns out of the kids' hands who was in the position I was in back in the day. Stop them from getting the gun. That there's an easy middle ground to that. And go ahead.
What's outrageous to me is you've been reaching out for help, not once but twice. Mm-hmm. And at least once it even turned against you, and the second time you've just been ignored. So what should someone do who's in the same position like you were? I mean, I can imagine that a lot of people have exactly this fear, and it's incredible that it's horrible that this happens when you turn to someone looking for help and you are being stabbed in the back even more.
Yeah, and the worst part about it is, especially the hardest part is for our kids in school, because there's such a lack of even counselors to talk to in schools, let alone ones that'll listen to you, And I think that's one of the hardest problems to tackle. I think that we need to have competent counselors that are empathetic, but I think it also needs to work more at a ground level, like a grassroots level, where we start looking at the people who are in that pain as potential friends and do it on a small personal level. One of the biggest dangers that I see us falling down as a country and as a society is this push to point out the kids who might be in danger. Like, I understand that we want to protect ourselves from threats, but looking at every kid who's in pain and every kid who's depressed and every kid who is in that dark place as a potential school shooter and reporting them to the FBI, involved in all that is just going to create more monsters. We're going to push the outcasts further out to the dark. And instead of that, you have to think about, there's a really small percentage of people who will actually follow through on that terrible act. Okay. And when you actually follow through with it, then you've crossed a line and you deserve the punishment that comes at you. But then before you get to that point, there's a much larger percentage of people who are in that dark area where it's a possibility, where they've been thinking about it, where they're in that kind of pain. And even if it's just personally directed, I think that we need to remove that barrier between suicide and homicide they're both violent acts that take a life. And so that same urge, just because it's flipped the other way and one's attacking the other one, one's attacking yourself, it doesn't mean that suicidal urges aren't just as bad as homicidal urges. So when we have those kinds of thoughts, we want to an empathetic way and not look at the person like, oh, you're going to be a threat, so we need to turn you to the FBI. Talk to them, smile at them, treat them like they're a person. One of the easiest ways to look at how this phenomenon works in reality is look at something like goth culture. Okay, goth culture, the kids, you dress up in the spike clothes and the dark mascara and the makeup and the trench coats, and you have all the angry kind of personal appearance, and it does two things. One, it pushes away everybody that you want to push away, and it opposes everybody and tells them, "I'm angry, leave me alone." Okay, but at the same time, it pulls in your in group. The people who are like you, who feel like you, and who are in that same place, see that, and they see, oh, that person's like me, so I can identify with them. And so that is an easier way to make a friendship on that level when they see the personal connection there. So even something that's abrasively angry side is also can have the purpose of bringing in someone who agrees with you to make an in-group of friends they can care about. Mm-hmm. And we see that also happening on the negative side in something like troll culture. We have the internet now where the anonymity of the internet makes everybody be able to say whatever they want without any ramifications. And also has a whole selection of cheerleaders to egg you on to say you're great and you need to keep making that disgusting remark. It used to be that if you were a bully or if you were a racist or if you hated women or if you were a sexual abuser, you might have 2 or 3 buddies that would cheer you on, but everybody else around you would point you out that you're an asshole. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But now 2 or 3 buddies you can connect with on a different level.
Yeah. You'd have 2 or 3 buddies you connect with on a different level, but the rest of society would be like, nah, you're a dick. And so you need to go away. And so you wouldn't have the mass positive reinforcement. Now you'd be that same asshole, and there's entire chat groups and entire subreddits devoted to cheering you on and telling you not only are you good at that, but here's how you should be more of an asshole, and here's how you should be more of a sexist prick, and here's how you could be even more racist. And so with what I was talking about earlier with having the attention, the negative attention, and the negative reinforcement can be positive. That's happening now in society where the negative reinforcement for these people, it's their positive in-group. This is what their friends are cheering them on doing. And so that's how we end up with things like incels, where the kids who are lonely and can't get a girlfriend, they have other friends who can't get girlfriends, and they say, oh, well, women hate us, so we have to kill them all. And that kind of insanity only happens when you're in that isolated subgroup of negative reinforcement. And I think that's the real hardest thing to combat, but the only way you can do it is by normalizing normalizing the kindness aspect, normalizing being nice to someone.
Okay.
Go ahead.
How would you approach this practically? So let's say I have the feeling that someone I know, I've seen someone in my school, someone around is acting strangely. Mm-hmm. Personally, I would feel strange walking up to that guy or to that gal and say, hey, what's wrong with you? Because then you kind of imply that something is going on. So what would be a good way to do that? What would be a good way to connect?
Start off with just saying, hi, how you doing? You want to grab some lunch? Mm-hmm. Don't ask them how they're doing. Just ask, or don't ask them what's wrong with them. Just be like, hey, how's it going? Did you see that movie last night? Do you want to go catch a movie? Do you want to hang out after work, after school? Do you want to go hang out after work? Like, I got nothing to do today. You want to go chill? Like, do that. Treat it like a person. Like especially if that kid's let's take a hypothetical. You're at work or you're at your school, okay, and you see the kid off to the side who is really angry himself and he keeps his head down. He's obviously mad about stuff, but he smells bad and he always looks kind of disheveled. And you think that he might be going through problems at home, but something is a bit off about him, but you can't tell what. Okay. How do you react to that kid? I would say, go over to him and ask him how his day was. Go over to him and ask him what kind of movie he likes. Go over to him if he's writing something, ask him what he's writing. If he's listening to music, ask him what music he listens to. Treat him like he's actually a person. Treat him the same way you would treat the guy sitting next to him who's not doing anything wrong. Treat him like that. We'll go up to him and be normal with him and be like, hey, dude, did you see the new Avengers movie? Which would you think Captain America would win or Iron Man would win if they fought? Like have the normal conversations that aren't about, oh, you're depressed and what's it like being depressed, or how's it like at home with your family beating you? Break down the walls of normalcy first. Make it comfortable for them. You on a friendship level, knowing that you're not going to judge them because of how they look or how they what they seem like, or how you're not going to judge them on their pain, because people are really afraid of being judged on their pain. Be the person who's not going to judge them on their pain. Be the person who's just going to be like, okay, dude, that's okay. It's normal to feel like that when shit's happening to you, dude. It's all right. You're not a bad person. I like you. It's okay. I understand you might smell a bit bad, but I'm still going to sit next to you because you seem like you're a cool guy.
What if they push me away? What if they think that I'm just mocking them? Or what if they think I was just another one of those guys?
The only way to combat that is
step my back.
That's a constant problem. The only way to combat that is consistency. Be consistent and be normal with it. Have it be a real thing. If when they push you away, then you shy away and you run away, then they were right. Then you were only there to give them pity. And as soon as they got tough, then you went away. Be the person who's not going to do that. Be like, all right, dude, it's all right. I'll come to you tomorrow. Do him tomorrow and ask him again. Just be consistent. Be the bright spot in their life, because then even if they're pushing you away all the time, and even if it seems like they don't like you, and even if it seems like that you're not breaking through to them, when things go down, I'd be willing to bet you'd be the one they'd come to first, because you're the normal one who's always been nice to them, who's always treated them kindly, and has always been the consistent calm spot. When you're in that tornado of chaos, you need to have one calm spot that you can actually stand on and not have the tornado hit you. And when some random person is like, okay, cool, dude, you're all right. I still like you. It's okay. Don't worry about it. That can become your spot of calmness. And even if it's not going to work every time, okay, it's not going to work every time, and it's not going to work with everybody. But even if it works with one person, it's worth trying. And the fact that it's completely free, it doesn't hurt you at all. It's not going to take anything away from you to treat someone else like a person. And if that simple act of treating someone like a person can then stop that person from doing something terrible to themselves or to someone else, then you have succeeded in all aspects of life. There shouldn't be any higher calling to help someone out of that depression. Definitely.
What are warning signs? How can I?
There's a couple, and they seem to be diametrically opposed. So there's the obvious warning signs that you can see blatantly, like the coming to school with bruises, having a outlandish anger problem, racism, misogyny, being involved in a negative in-group. Those things tend to be expressions of inward pain. Being involved in something like an incel group says that you don't like yourself very much, and so you're doing what you can to make everybody else not like you too. Because that's a simple fact. When you hate yourself, and if you think everybody else hates you, then you're going to hate yourself, and then you do everything you can to make everybody else hate you too, because that's the way you think it should be. Mm-hmm. And when you see someone like that who's in that group, the warning signs. Excuse me, slightly lost my train of thought, but I'm getting back onto it. So the warning signs for looking at those kind of groups: having the negative subgroup, having the anger problem. But then there's the flip side of it. The flip side is it's the going insulated, going insular, turning inward. Okay, being completely shut off, being really quiet, giving away all personal belongings that they normally would cherish. That's a big one. Being completely shut off from social interaction. That's a big one. Not having any emotional affectation for things. If something looks like it should hurt someone, but then they don't respond like they have any emotional reaction whatsoever, that's a big warning sign, because that means they're close to not giving a crap about anything. Okay. And so it's either extreme. The moderation is key to everything, including moderation. So when you have the swinging pendulum of sometimes I feel bad, some days I feel good, and I'm kind of swinging on this. That's a normal pendulum. But as soon as that pendulum gets stuck on either one of those sides, that I'm either always pissed off or I'm always sullen, that's really when the danger signs start to hit. Because then your pendulum's swinging in an entirely different arc. Okay, because it's not that your pendulum stopped in anger. It's that now you're swinging inside of anger. So either you're lightly pissed off or you're extremely pissed off. And you never really come out of the anger part. So in the same thing with depression. Either you're lightly depressed or you're extremely depressed, but you never get to swing back out into the light. So those are the really big spots. And if you see someone who's having those kind of issues, just use your discretion. If they're obviously making threats and they're obviously making threats of violence, do report. There is a line where you have to have public safety and you do have to report. But not every depressed kid is a school shooter. And not every kid who's in that pain is a threat. And if you... Oh, I don't want to sign out. If you look at these people like they're a threat, then... you will completely, you're just going to make the problem worse. You're going to create more darkness.
Okay. So you talked about being bullied, not by 1 or 2, 3 people, but by a large amount of people at those schools. Mm-hmm. So what if my daughter, my son is being bullied? I see that there's a problem.
I wanted to shut down. I'm like, no, I don't want to. And then all of a sudden my entire computer, see, there's my screen.
Oh yeah. Okay. But that works just as well if it's okay for you?
Yeah, it works fine for me.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so I think we left off with a question. What if I realize that my son, my daughter is being bullied at school? I notice he or she's acting strange. So how can I help them to get out of that? Or how can I help them to react to those bullies?
That's a tough one. I would say the first one is to remember to have empathy, to remember that the bullies that are bullying them most likely are having extreme troubles in their own lives. So they're probably going through a lot of issues, dealing with a lot of extreme things. So to have a bit of empathy for them, to stay safe, that if it gets to a point where they feel like they're actually in any danger, to make sure they report it. Make sure they talk to their school officials and anyone they would need to for that. But to try to look at the humanity of it first. Try to look at the person who's bullying them less as an attacker and more as a victim themselves of whatever pain they're going through.
But that doesn't really help them much in the sense that the situation...
It doesn't. And it's hard to make the situation change. It's really hard without attacking the root cause of the bullying. If you're in school and you're getting bullied, go to the official and tell the official what's going on and see if they can help. But bullying isn't just a single incident kind of thing. The bully who's doing that isn't just a bully during the 5 minutes they're picking on you. They're that way the rest of the day. So I would say try to reach out to them or show them empathy in a way and show them that you're human. The more you humanize them yourself, the more they'll look at you like you might be part of their positive in-group too.
Okay, I see. Okay. You mentioned your parents a lot and the abuse you got by your parents. So where are they today?
Well, my stepdad is dead. Mm-hmm. He died 7 or 8 months ago. My real dad, I haven't seen since I was like 14, and I think he's dead. Last time I saw him was up in Oregon, and that didn't go well. And then my mom is still alive, but I haven't spoken to her since I started talking about this. So going on 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you couldn't do anything against your mother or your father because they're family. And what kind of feelings do you have towards them now that you've changed your life, now that you have a family, now that you got everything under control? I mean, they've been a major part of your suffering for a long time of your life.
For most of them, I don't have any feelings at all except for hatred. So for my mom and my brother, I still have some love. My brother, I have lots of animosity to. He went through a lot of the same stuff I did, only he handles it entirely differently, and he continued the cycle of destructive abuse and alcoholism and drug abuse, and just he's continuing on that same path. And my mom, she's my mom, so I'll always love her, and I'll always be there for her when she needs me. But I don't, as a person, I don't like her. Like as a person, none of my family are people that I would hang out with. I would never like be with them socially. And my extended family, I don't have any dealings with whatsoever, except for a couple cousins who are way far out who didn't have anything to do with any of this. But any aunts or uncles who are dealing with that kind of drug abuse, especially from my stepdad's side, I don't have anything to do with any of them. In fact, I blatantly told them all that I don't love them. I am not part of their family, and they should not consider me to be part of their family. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I took the perspective that cutting out the toxic elements of the life is better than trying to rectify the toxic situation. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's not. But it's cost me more than just that family members, though. I've lost a couple best friends because of coming out. That they either were too shocked by my story of what I went through, and they didn't ever realize that I had gone there, and that made them not like me anymore, or they thought that I was trying to do it for political reason, and so they stopped talking to me too. Those ones I really regret, because if they'd have paid more attention, it's not political at all. In fact, I'm trying to be as apolitical as possible with it. So,
okay,
but yeah, it's definitely hasn't come without cost.
Yeah. You mentioned that from the time you were 20, when you last had those suicidal thoughts, it was a long healing process, 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
What's happened during this healing process, and what can family members, friends do to support someone in that healing process once someone has made the step of that?
Well, there's a couple big steps that happen. The first is acknowledging the actual feelings. A lot of times people don't want to pay attention to how they're really feeling. They try to mask it over. I was doing that a lot with my escapism, with trying to go and run into other things and change my reality. Acknowledging that these things really did happen, that this pain is a real thing, and my reaction to it is not a terrible reaction. That was one of the first big steps, owning my own feelings about it. And then once I did that, the other biggest step is trying to not move on, but adjust my reality to the situations that I've been in. So instead of trying to say, just get over the things I went through, they all just color me and they shape who I am now. So I do say that I learned a lot from my parents. Like, I learned a lot about parenting. I learned what not to do.
Sometimes
with my own kids, like, one of the things growing up with me was complete lack of consistency. Because of the chaotic nature of my family, there was a lot of, when I needed to be disciplined, it would go right to the worst thing. Like, I would get in trouble and mom would scream at me, "I'm going to kick your ass and you need to get the fuck out of my house. You need to leave right away." And then 20 minutes later, she'd ask me to come and hang out with her and watch TV. And like, nothing actually happened. And so that completely undercut any authority and undercut any trust that I had of her as a parent. Mm-hmm. And so with my own kids, I am the model of consistency. I get mad at the same things the same way every time. If I tell you you're going to be grounded for a week, you're going to be grounded for a week, but I'm also not going to fly off the handle and be upset about random things just because I feel like being mad. You know, I just make myself consistent. And I've never struck my kids in anger. I've never done drugs in front of my kids, except for marijuana, but I live in Denver and it's legal here. So it's a whole different situation. It's using those examples of the things that I had happen to me and breaking that cycle and changing it. And the biggest achievement that I've managed to get in my entire life is that my 17-year-old daughter tells everybody that I'm her best friend. Mm-hmm. And when I was 17, I wouldn't talk to my parents without yelling. And we sit and have the best fun conversations, and she tells me all about her love life. She tells me my 17-year-old daughter comes to me to talk to me about her love life with a boyfriend. How many dads to get to have that happen to them?
Well, my daughters are not in that age yet, but I hope they will when they reach that age. Definitely.
Exactly. It's a conversation that some dads might not want to have, but I tell you, nothing makes you feel better than to know you have that kind of comfortability and secureness that she's safe enough to come talk to me about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm not sure I want to have it.
Yeah, no, it's an awkward conversation to have, but having it is the fact that I was able to have it means that it's a worthwhile thing to have. You know.
Absolutely.
And it's do your best to break the cycle is what sorry, I kind of rambled on that last answer.
No, that's fine. It's fine. So what's next for you? I mean, you've received a lot of attention, started giving speeches as far as I know in schools. And so what's the plan? I mean,
well, I have a couple really big things coming up. I'm going to be working with, I keep on getting connected with people who want to work with me from all over the country. And usually it's either for a political purpose or they want for a religious one. So either they want to have me help me get them elected or they want to help me bring everybody to Jesus. And I don't want to do either one of those. So I've avoided tearing up with most people, but there's a couple groups recently that approached me that are really interesting. There's a couple guys out of South Carolina. They run a group called Proactive RG, and they're a couple of guys who used to be SWAT officers. They're career SWAT officers, one for 8 years, I believe, one for 12 years. And they recently quit the SWAT team to start this real-world training program where they go into schools and they show real-world threat preparedness to teach you how to spot a potential shooter, what to do if someone's bleeding next to you, how to take away a gun, how to barricade a room, like real-world threat assessment. But they've encountered an issue where some places think that might be profiling kids or that there's too much aggression and not enough sympathy. And so we're actually going to team up to make a program tentatively called Have a Heart, but Have a Plan, where you have to have the plan for what to do, but also have the empathy to know when to do it. And so we're going to be teaming up for that coming up here soon. I'm supposed to be flying out to go speak with them within the next month. And I have another big story already filmed that's going to be coming out in November that is a big multi-channel coordinated effort about the lack of competent counselors in schools. There's a station that reached out for me from Dallas, Texas, WFAA in Dallas. They reached out to me about how in their school district, they broadcast to the largest school district in America. And in their school district, there's such a lack of competent counselors. There's something like an average of 1 per 200 students, but then a hefty percentage, 20 to 30% of the schools have no counselors whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
And so, it's going to be focused on that. That's coming out in mid-November. I'm writing a book. I'm halfway through my manuscript on the book. I am doing everything I can to speak at schools and go talk wherever anybody with a pulse will want to listen. If you want to reach me or contact me or anybody wants to get a hold of me, they can find me at Twitter at @StarkAuthor or at StarkDad1313. You can also reach me by email at aaronstarkauthor@gmail.com, or you can find me on Facebook, Aaron Stark, and the picture of me is out of my TED Talk. I'm open to any inquiries. I also, I've been deluged with people wanting to contact me, just call me to help them with their own personal issues. And I'm cool with doing that too. I think it's one of the most rewarding things of this is the personal aspect of it. So it doesn't matter if you're a corporation or just a regular person. If you want to talk, I'm down to talk.
Okay.
I got a lot of stuff coming along, so stay tuned.
Definitely we'll check out. And I recommend to everyone watching this to really check out. And you have an amazing story, definitely.
Thank you. Yeah, and everybody can already find the two big things I've done already. I have wrote an article for the Washington Post entitled "I Would Have Been a School Shooter." That's 1,500 words. That's a more detailed version of my life story. And then I did my TEDx talk for TEDx Boulder, and that's on YouTube. And that's about, I think right now is crossing 4.6 million views.
That's amazing. How did that happen? Did they reach out to you or?
Actually, I saw that it was coming, so I reached out to them and I applied. You have to go through an application process and you have to go through a couple tryouts. But I did, and it was the most amazing and bizarre experience I've ever went through. I had heard that TED Talks were very regimented and very to the letter. Like you had to have your script down and you had to be practiced and all that. The odd fact about my TED Talk, I never wrote it down, ever.
Yeah.
And I didn't even practice it the week beforehand. I would only do it at the practices when I had to perform it, because it's just my life story. So I didn't really need to prepare that much. But it was kind of odd that I'm sitting there not really preparing, but people next to me are working meticulously over every little detail of their script. And it was amazing. It was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And all the different speakers that night were fantastic. It was great.
I guess the hardest thing is getting the timing right.
It was. I actually went, I think, a minute over. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But luckily they liked it. So they were like, keep going, just keep going. So yeah, it was getting the timing right, and honestly not breaking down too much every time, because I can't help. I think I did a couple times even during this talk. I can't help but tear up at a couple spots during my story, just because it's still so raw and on the surface. And I want to keep it raw and on the surface, because I really think that seeing that there's a real person that feels this, and it's not just some faceless statistic, is really important. And there's millions of faces like mine. So I'm just a regular guy that went through all this stuff. But if I can help show other people that doesn't make you a monster, then it's completely worth it.
No, absolutely not. And that's what I found so amazing about your talk. And that's why I actually reached out to you, because your story is relatable. You made it relatable, even if for someone who was not in that situation. Luckily, it made me understand what's really happening inside someone's head, being bullied, abused, and who's in a situation. And also that it doesn't take much to really help those people, or to
it doesn't. It's not. Yeah, it's not some giant plan we have to do, or some massive program. It's literally just being nice. Just smile, be friendly, treat the person like a person. Mm-hmm. Treat the person who doesn't feel like they're human like they're a person. Give love to the people we think deserve it the least, because they need it the most.
Yeah. So what about, I think it's Mike is his name, right?
Mike. Yeah.
Mike. You're still in touch with him?
Oh, absolutely. He's my best friend. He's uncle to my kids.
Oh, wow. Okay, amazing. So
yeah, we talk every couple days. Yeah.
So what was that? So what does he think about your developments or your?
He's super proud and encourages me completely. For him, it's a bit weird for him, because I'm talking publicly about the conversations that we've had privately for decades. So it's like, he's like, yeah, dude, I'm going to go watch you speak and say the same thing I've heard you say 1,000 times. So, okay. So for him on that level, it's a bit weird for him, but he couldn't be prouder. He's couldn't be more supportive. I've done so much that it could potentially be friendship ruining with him, and he has overlooked all of it to the point where I love my wife to death, but he's the one human I'd pick over my wife. If I had to choose to, I'd probably pick Mike, because he's saved me over everybody in my entire life more times than I could ever count. So
I understand.
Yeah. I literally could not have a better friend, and my kids could not have a better uncle. So.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Hey man, so thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, it's amazing. There's just so much in it to digest, and I guess there's so many takeaways for everyone watching this, and you're truly an inspiration for a lot of people.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for having me on. Like I said, I just want to help show a kid who's in that dark spot that there's a way out, that you don't have to live in that darkness, that there is a light at the end of it.
Absolutely. And I mean, this whole thing really hit you over the head, I guess. I mean,
I was just a stay-at-home dad playing video games beforehand. Mm-hmm. Like, I went from being sit at home playing Spider-Man to talking on national TV and being seen by millions. And here's one important takeaway, if I could have anybody take something away from this. If the amount of responses that I've inspired, people coming to me with their issues, coming to me with their stories of pain from all over the world, stories like a gentleman in Pakistan who was getting so abused and so bullied that he couldn't talk about it because they would literally kill him where he lived, but he sent me a message. If I could inspire them to come out with their stories, where it wasn't really scary to me, it was just my normal. What could they inspire when they talk?
Yeah.
If you have a story of darkness and if you have a story of pain, speak out and speak your truth. The truth really will set you free, and you'll never have any idea how many people you could connect with and could help just by talking about what happened with you in your life. Talking about normalizing the pain and making everybody see that it's not just the monsters that go through it, it's just the regular people.
Yeah.
And please speak out and share your own stories.
And what would you recommend to victims of abuse? So if you're in an abusive family, if you have a family member who is on a regular basis, if maybe it's the extended family, maybe it's some other people. So what would you tell those people? What should they do?
Keep moving. Keep going forward. The only thing that's constant in this life is change. The only thing that's absolutely certain is that tomorrow is going to be different than today. And today might be terrible and today might be full of darkness, but tomorrow is going to be different in one way or another. So the only thing we can do is adapt to these changes and not refuse to accept the devastation left in the wake of change. Realize that eventually you will look back and see that this will all be different. And if you keep moving one step in front of the other, it might seem like a really hard thing to move forward when you're in that darkness, but one small step at a time, left foot and then right foot and then followed by left foot again. And eventually you're going to be running. Just please keep walking.
Okay. Thank you very much. So
thank you,
Aaron. I have two questions I always ask the people I'm talking to.
Sure.
And the first question is, we had this conversation because you truly are an exceptional person. Who do you consider an exceptional person? I might even talk to next.
I would say Christian Picciolini. He is a ex-white supremacist. He was one of the founders of, I believe it's Hammerfall is the name of the organization, but I don't know the exact name. I don't care to know the exact name. It was a white power organization in the 80s. And he was one of the founders of it and one of the leaders of the white power movement in America. And over the last 20 years, he has left it and now spends his life fighting to bring people out of that hatred and to combat xenophobia and racism. So I'd say that he inspires me greatly on a lot of levels, and I'd say that he would be a great one to talk to.
Okay, I'll do my best to reach out to him and see if we can make that happen. And so my last question is to close up this call. What's your message to the world? What do you want to...
If I could distill it down to one message, it's give love to the people who you think deserve it the least because they need it the most. The person who you think is in pain, or who you think is different than you, they have they bleed the same way you do. They go to the bathroom the same way you do. They eat food the same way you do. They just look at the world differently and they think differently. They could worship a different God. Or they could look at a different political party. Or they could listen to different music. They could like a different sports team. None of that makes them a worse person than you. None of that makes them evil. It just makes them different. Embrace the differences and realize that we are all different. We are all that outcast in a way. So give love to the people who we feel deserve it the least. They need it the most.
Wonderful. Aaron Stark, I thank you so much. And
thank you very much for having me. It was a great conversation. I had a lot of fun.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching, and in a few seconds you'll hear about the extraordinary person that I'm going to talk to in my next conversation. But before that, I need to ask you for your help. See, finding people who inspire and motivate you to make a change, that's what's most important to me. But to connect you with these amazing people and to bring you conversations that you will not find anywhere else, I need you to become a part of our journey. So please get involved and leave a comment below with your own questions, and maybe even tell me who I should talk to next. And if you know anyone who might like this conversation, then please share it, because I'm sure that they will like it too, and it will help to grow this channel and to make an impact together. And by the way, on my website you will find all current and upcoming episodes, including show notes and transcripts, background info, books and websites of my guests, podcast links, and much more. And once you become an email subscriber, there is always some exclusive content, so don't forget to sign up, and I'll see you in the next conversation.
In the next episode, Rob talks to Devin Person. When Devin decided to reinvent his life in search of more fulfillment and purpose, he chose a rather unusual path. He decided to become a wizard. As the subway wizard of New York, Devin now brings a little magic into the lives of commuters and helps people and companies to create a better reality for themselves. Rob and Devin talk about finding your purpose in life, creating the reality you want, the surprising role a medication for his knee played in becoming a wizard, and much more. Join the conversation now.